All right. Hello, goddesses.
Hey, goddesses. Hey, queens.
And hello, world. Welcome to Goddess Glow, the Red Lip Alchemy Chronicles. This is where brilliance meets boldness and creativity ignites transformation. We're embracing wholeness in our communities. So, the Goddess Glow Red Lip Alchemy Chronicles is a sacred space where Black femmes, as African descended creatives, can come together to connect, converse, and radiate all of our brilliance. This podcast honors the divine power within us, weaving African diasporatic practices, indigenous traditions, ancestral veneration, and restorative rituals into a tapestry of personal and communal alchemy. Through bold storytelling, spiritual exploration, and creative wisdom, we celebrate the red lip as a symbol of rebellion, beauty, and sacred sisterhood. So join us today. Thank you for joining us today on this journey to celebrate our power, honoring our ancestors, and glowing unapologetically. All right. How's everybody doing? My name is Tiffany. I am the Afro maximalist magician. And we also have Professor K with us and Ebony Flo. So is this really week 4, guys? Are we a month into it? So this project started with a year of me just kind of thinking about being a healer, healing myself, and tapping into my magic, tapping into my witchery. I'm a bibliophile. So one of the ways I do that is by finding books. And so I came across this book, African Goddess Initiation, and realized that this isn't something that I could do alone. So I tapped into my biological sister to bring all of her beauty and brilliance to this project as well, and my chosen sister, who is a spiritual gangster, so that we can all work on the project together. And here we are. And so this week we are going to be learning about Tituba, who is the goddess of feeling safe. And we're going to be talking about some ancestral protection rituals. So the mantra for today and for this week is I am safe, and it is safe to be safe. And so this is something that resonates particularly well with me because I think, for me being a Black woman in America and in this society with so much misogynoir, there are so many spaces where we don't feel safe. And so I appreciate having this opportunity to embrace that we deserve to be safe and we deserve to have protection and to honor ways in which we can do that. Although I'm supposed to be hosting this week, we have an expert on Tituba. So let's just note that although we call ourselves sorority twins, who were born 4 years apart, Professor K is the older sister. And for anybody else out there who is a younger sibling, you may relate to, different periods in your life where you look up to your older sibling and you think, wow, like they are so cool and they are so smart and they know everything. And I feel that way even more as an adult than I did as a child. And so last week, when we were talking about Sarah Bartman, is like, I learned about Sarah Bartman from my sister when we took a research trip to Paris in search of Sarah Bartman. And now Tituba, who I had no idea who that was and assumed that nobody here would know who it was, Professor K basically got a PhD in her. And so I'm going to turn it over to the one and only to teach us all right now. Put that professor hat. You should have your K glasses on today because we gonna learn today. So take it away.
Okay, so before I get on the roll with Tituba, do you guys want to go through some of the questions or the journal prompts before we get into that? Do y'all want to do that first, and then I can talk more? That's kind of how we did it last week, or do y'all want me to jump in with Tituba and then go back?
I
Because
want to
I
jump
would,
in. I've been waiting all week
because
to
I
learn
teased it.
from you. It's not being a tease.
No one likes a tease.
No
Well,
one likes
I
a
like a
tease.
tease. Meow.
So, okay, so as soon as I saw the goddess for the week was Tituba, I'm like, oh, Tituba. So I went to Spelman College as undergrad, and we had a year long, well, it was 2 semesters, two semesters of a course called African Diaspora in the World. we reread all things. So I literally probably got more education out of that African diaspora in the world class my first year, and then a senior seminar with Beverly Guy Sheftall on Black feminist thought than like all of my grad education. Like all the scholarship I do now, all the writing I do, most of my citations still come from that undergraduate education at a historically Black liberal arts women's college, Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, than the predominantly white institution where I earned my master's and my PhD. So I say all that to say, it was in the African diaspora in the world class that I read the book, or was at least assigned it. I actually don't remember if I read it at the time, but I just read it. Tituba, Black Witch of Salem by Maurice Condé. And so as soon as I saw Tituba, I was like, oh, I have this book. And so I went looking for the book. In my, me and Tiff were joking, like I don't have a Dewey Decimal System. I have the Bell Decimal System with like how I categorize and organize my books. So it was not where I thought it would be, and it ended up being in the 13-year-old's room. So I was like, of course I put this book in the 13-year-old's room so that they have access to these like powerful, figures. So so I got the book out of their room, and I read it this week. And I was like,
Just read
oh
it.
my
Can you
goodness.
hold that book up again and show all those tabs?
Oh,
Stop it.
First time you showed me the book.
no. So what happened with the
Happened
tabs
was-
is what had happened was, so I read the book and then I decided to do an IG live today and a YouTube video today talking about Tituba and connecting it to my happily unmarried journey and my erotic empowerment journey. And so the tabs are like just different quotes that I wanted to pull out for the live and the YouTube, which I'm happy to discuss here as well. So the story with Tituba. So there's not a lot of historical information about Tituba. We do know that she was in Barbados. This is like, so the book is set in like the late 1600s, like 1690, 1692, and a little bit later. So it's like the
And the
front
book is
end.
historical fiction. It's not an actual.
So it's not, so Maurice Condé does not like to call it a historical fiction or a historical novel, but it is like what I would say is like a speculative fiction, or like what there's a woman named Sarah Bartman who talks about she calls it critical fabulation, like when you have access to like just a little bit of stuff in the archive, particularly as it relates to like the African diaspora and Black women, like the archive is fragmented. And so what we often have to do is like take the little pieces that we have available in an archive and connect that with our own critical thinking and our own creativity and imagining like what's possible or what happened with these different figures. So Maurice Condé
Critical
basically,
fabulation is my new favorite word.
critical fabulous. Don't you love Black women? Because we be coming up with some stuff. So that I think is in her book called Losing Your Mother, which is about her experience of like going back to West Africa and, in search of like this connection, this ancestral connection. And so this is what Maurice Condé is doing in Tituba. So there's just this little bit. So basically what history records about Tituba is just like, this was a Black woman who was put on trial for witchcraft during the Salem witch trials, right? And there's not much else about her. And there is on record that she was married to this man named John Indian. So Maurice Condé is like, well, I kept that in the story because that was a part of the record. But so that's like just the little bit of information that we have about her. But what Maurice Condé says at the beginning of this book is, she says, Tituba and I lived for a year on the closest of terms. During our endless conversation, she told me things she had confided to nobody else. So there's this description of her having this like spiritual connection with Tituba. So she's like, she was with me writing the story. And she's like, at times, she's like looking over my shoulder as I'm writing, or at times I would just leave the manuscript in the office and I'm sure she looked it over. And then the next day she would let me know what she wanted me to fix or what she wanted me to correct. So she writes this narrative, and so the backdrop is basically, again, it's like the kind of front end of the development of the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, and what's happening with like the continent of Africa, the Caribbean, as well as the US, right? So again, this is the 1600s, this is pre-1776, the actual United States of America. And so Tituba is in, so this is the story now. This is not what we have from the record, but this is how Maurice Condé tells the story. So her mother is of West African heritage, has been kidnapped, stolen, and sold into slavery, gets attacked by one of the white men on board the slave ship, so that by like the time she comes to Barbados, she's already the child from this non-consensual, from this rape, basically. And so she's like depressed because she's dealing with like the trauma of that. And so the person who now owns her decides to give her to another man who's enslaved, to like basically take care of her. And that other person, the other man had also been depressed. Because I mean, I think one of the things Conde gets at is like there was no happy slave, right? Like this kind of narrative of the happy slave, the happy Negro. And so she really does get at like the psychology of that kind of brutal oppression. But then he does come to love Tituba. He takes on this child that's his own child and loves this child. And so these are all spoilers. So if y'all don't want any spoilers, is this like a no spoiler conversation? Okay. So what ends up happening, it's like,
Spoil us today.
spoil us, right? So, this loving husband now is like taking care of her, taking care of the daughter, raising the daughter as his own. And so she becomes more herself and all of that kind of stuff. Then the person who had given her to this man sees her with the daughter and decides he wants to take her and goes to like attack her. And she like immediately goes into like fight mode, remembering having been attacked. And so she strikes him to prevent him from attacking her. This is all in front of Tituba, who's like a little kid. And because she strikes him, the punishment is that she is lynched and killed for hitting a white man, basically. And then the husband then falls into a state of depression and commits suicide. So Tituba is like left without parents. But then the plantation like changes hands and some other stuff happens. So she ends up being released from slavery. And there's a Black woman who like lives in the woods, Mama Yaya, who takes her in and becomes her spiritual mother and like teaches her about all of the herbs and connecting to the earth and connecting to the animals and the sacred practices and all this kind of stuff. So she's basically living her best life with Mama Yaya, right? So her mother has passed at this point, her father has passed, and then eventually Mama Yaya passes. But because she has this spiritual connection to the ancestors, she can still communicate with them. And then this trifling man comes along. So this is a man who's enslaved, but can kind of get, he has he can move around, right? His movement is not too constrained. So he runs into her and he's basically like, you could be cute if you did this, this, and this to yourself. And so then she's suddenly like enamored and like, oh, well, maybe I do need to do this to myself. Maybe I do need to fix my hair. Maybe I do need to do whatever. So she consults her, her mom and her spiritual mom. And they're both like, that dude is whack. Like, why are you even fooling around with this dude? And it's like, but mommy, I love him. Like, give me a spell to get him. And they're like, you already have him. And she's like, well, no, to get him and to keep him or whatever. So he ends up convincing her to give up her freedom to be with him on this plantation. And he's like there with this white woman who's a mistress, a mistress like as like the master and a mistress kind of mistress. And her husband has died or whatever. So he's like, she's a good mistress. And Titsu was like, there's no such thing as a good mistress. Like at the end of the day, she's still engaged in human trafficking. And so so she knows intuitively she should not do this. Her mom and her spiritual mom are like, girl, what are you doing? And she still chooses to leave her freedom to go with this man. Okay, so this is where I'm going to read a couple of passages. So this is what her mom says to her when she first comes to her mom with this. So the mom says, you only need to take one look at him to see he's a shallow Negro. I'm adjusting the words here because I'm in mixed company, full of hot air and bravado. So the mom is like, girl, what you doing? You know what this reminds me of, sis? So when I was married, the person I didn't have a passport. I never left the country before we got married. Can you sit here?
Just got here. Good deal.
Okay. Okay, so when I got married, the person I got married to like didn't have a passport, had never been out of the country. And so he was doing this first international trip where he literally had to go through the whole process of getting his first passport. And so I'm talking to our mother about it. And my mom was like, that Negro didn't even have a passport before he married you. Like, this was the energy of the mom. Like, he is like full of hot air, full of bravado, like all the talk, but no action and no walk. But she still decides to do it. So that's the mom's reaction to it. So then she says to him, she has this moment where she meets him up, she meets up with him and he's wanting her to come with him. And she's like, well, no, I need to like take a week or whatever. So she says, I knew I should have fled. Instead, I stayed rooted to the spot, passive and adoring. And it's just like, so she knows. So what I do love about how Maurice Condé writes the book is you get access to her interiority and her reflection on, like, she knows what intuitively she should do. She knows what her spirit guides are telling her to do, and she overrides it. And so what I was saying is like, this book had me effed up this week because I was like, it felt like such a mirror of all of the times that I knew intuitively what to do or what not to do. And I had override based on what I saw or what somebody told me, as opposed to what I knew deep down inside I was supposed to do or not do. And so it was really disturbing and important ways to remind me of the times that I'd done that and remind me not to do that again. And so she's, so this is the other thing. And then, well, I'll stop and then we can talk a little bit and then I can go on some more if you want me. So he gets pissed when she says she wants a week. So she says, in rage, he picked up his straw hat. What was there about John Indian to make me so sick with love for him? Not very tall, average height, 5'7", not very big, not ugly, but not handsome either. Fine set of teeth, burning eyes. I must confess, it was downright hypocritical for me to ask myself such a question, since I knew all too well where his main asset lay. And I dared not look below the jute cord that held up his shorts, tight-fitting trousers, to the huge lump of his penis, or the huge bump of his penis. So she's basically like, I wanted the D. Let me stop acting like it was about anything more than a D. And that's what I went for. And so can we pause for the cause and talk about times we went against our intuition, times we let the D get in our head or mess us up, or times when our spiritual guides was like, don't do it, reconsider. And we were like, no, I'm gonna go for it anyway.
Too many times.
You interested in doing some storytelling? You want to share one example or not?
Times. Yeah, no,
Not today.
no, literally, I was just talking about it a couple of days ago. We celebrated one of my baby cousins in Napa a couple of days ago, and somebody I used to date came up and she said, gosh, y'all were together for a few years. I can't believe you stayed as long as you did. And I said, well, I can, and I know exactly why. And I was telling my mother, because we have very open conversations about sex all the time, that I don't know if I want someone that has that good of a penis because I don't want to stay longer than I need to. Because it was hypnotizing. So
You got stigmatized a little bit.
I got fully digmatized, lulled into you know, a dick days. So yeah, I mean, that's just one example that's fresh because we literally just talked about it this week. But I think we talked about it even last week, just around not trusting our gut and making those decisions and that level of betrayal. Auntie Nancy and the spider and that reflection, that betrayal is sometimes us betraying ourselves. And so, woo, yeah, it's real.
It's real. So I can relate to it. I'll share, my story. Now, every week is like all interconnected in so many amazing ways. And so thinking about, when we're talking about setting pleasure goals and my discomfort with setting pleasure goals, to like trusting your intuition, to getting digmatized. So, my story is that, I've always been such a pure, sweet, innocent, nice, lovely pediatrician. And so,
Cut it out.
Stop. That's that bullshit. You need to stop. Yep, exactly. But, but when I came to California, I was like, let me like, be California free and experiment a little bit. And so I have a friend from Philly who had a good friend here that she went to college with, who plugged me into a friend group. Y'all know this story, but we'll share this with the world. Who plugged me into a friend group that was that included, some guys, some women in the group. And so one of the guys lived around the corner from me, and, we kind of ended up hooking up. And so I was like, oh, this is, my time to just like explore and be California free. And a couple of things came up, during this process. One is that one day he was at my house and a memory flashed into my head out of nowhere. And so it was a memory, actually, Catherine and I were talking about this earlier this week, related to our father. And so our father ain't shit. He was, maybe still is, I don't know because I'm not in communication with him, a drug addict and an alcoholic and a child molester and many other horrible, terrible things. And so when my sister's oldest child, who just turned 24 yesterday, which is crazy, there was a baby dedication, and Catherine invited our father to that baby dedication. And so maybe about 6 months before that, I had written him a letter detailing to him all the reasons why he wasn't shit, and but also inviting him that if he was in a place where he was sober, that I was in a place to, try to, re-engage with him and forgive him, if he was sober. He never replied. But so I was talking to Catherine's godmother a couple of days after the dedication, and I was asking, like, why did my mother end up with him? Like, she, it's such this amazing woman. How did she end up with this loser? And her response was, your mom went through a lot of trauma, and because of that trauma, she had to become an adult very early. And he was someone who brought joy and playfulness into her life, and that's what she needed at the time. So this dude is at my house, and that memory pops up of, like, he brought joy and playfulness into your life, and that's what you needed at the time. And so my lesson is I ignored my intuition because that was the ancestors telling me something, right? And I was like, girl, you better stop letting your trauma make you think that everybody ain't shit and this isn't your dad and yada, yada, yada. And then fast forward, I don't know how many months later, 4 or 5 months later, we get a message that, he got arrested for drunk driving and all of this other nonsense. And it turns out that he actually was an alcoholic, right? And so the other friends in the group didn't know this. I didn't know this, but something in my spirit knew this, and that there were these parallels to my father that I was seeing. And so it was like the broken parts of me were drawn to the broken parts of him. And I remember I had a reading from Jacob the Face Reader, who Catherine also introduced me to. And he said something to me. He said, you're a very loyal person. You're so loyal, you're even loyal to your trauma, right? And so this is like, all of this is coming together with, like, how do we invite pleasure in safe ways? How do we break some of these generational curses? How do we trust our intuition? And in doing all that, that's how we create safety for ourselves. So that's how all of this tied together for me. So you want to share your story of your Tituba experience, Professor Gay?
So yeah, for me, it was definitely, well, like I said, with the marriage, it's like, okay, I knew and so this is one of the things I talked about with the live. It's like, because of our church upbringing, I was socialized toward marriage and, the illusion of the nuclear family and heteronormativity and all of these kinds of things. And I had a non-consensual experience with him, which, because of my church upbringing, I felt obligated toward marriage after that, right? And also because there was, like, I had presented him in a particular kind of way, and, like, this behavior did not align with that, and I was concerned about how that might look and all of these kind of things. But it's like, so I knew intuitively, like, I probably should not have gotten married. I definitely should not have married, like, this person in particular. And I had override on it. And it wasn't even just an intuitive thing. It was also, like, based on my actual experience with this person. Like, that was not something that was like, if that was the starting point, where were things going to go from there? And so for me, it was like, the parallels that I was seeing is like, well, one of the things that Condé does is looks at this, like, metaphor of marriage and subjugation, right? And so she's looking at it both, but it's both literal and figurative, right? Because it's the backdrop again of slavery and colonialism. But Tituba again is free, and she chooses to walk away from her freedom and her power and her wild side in order to enter into this, not only the bondage with the man by marrying him, but also the literal bondage of, like, becoming enslaved by virtue of being with him. And so it's like, I think there was a possibility for her to get the D without the marriage and without the subjugation, right? So I think the moral of the story is not, don't get the D necessarily.
Getting
The
some
moral is the
boundaries
story.
around.
Yeah, have some boundaries, like, be clear about what it is and what it isn't. And
Yeah.
again, she's clear about that, which I love. So it's not like this thing where she's, like, drawn away and naive about it. Like, she goes into it knowing that's the thing. Her spirit guides are like, this is about to open up the path of suffering for you. And, like, I can't tell you what to do or what not to do, but And so she makes her choices. And so she ends up marrying him. And then, of course, it ends up being a hot mess. She gets into it with the white mistress, who ends up basically selling them, and they end up getting sent to Massachusetts. So that's how she ends up in Massachusetts, because of the fallout with the white woman on the plantation. And so once she gets there, then this is where like the accusations of witchcraft and all of these other kinds of things come, and that leads to all of that. And then even then her spirit guides are like, well, it's terrible, it's going down, but like you're going to be the only one that survives this, like in Salem. So like everybody who accused her and the other people that got accused all end up dying. Either they get whatever punishment, hanging and stuff through the witch trials, or even the accusers, like sickness falls upon them. All of this kind of stuff happens. And so one of the things that Angela Davis points out, which I think is important, is that she is connected to her sensuality, her sexuality in a positive way, despite the traumas that are part of this system. Right. And so, she chooses to enter into the sexual relationship with John Indian, whom she's married. Then he ends up like abandoning her while she's in jail. Like he comes to see her once and then it's like just disappears and ends up hooking up with like some other white woman. And then the way the prison system set up. So there's also this interesting commentary on like the prison, what we would call today the prison industrial complex. And again, this is the late 1600s, before the United States is the United States. But the way the prison system is set up, if you get accused, you're basically responsible for your fees, whether you're found guilty or not. So unless you come from means where your family can come and pay these fees, you basically have to stay locked up until you can pay your fees, even if you're not found guilty. So of course, like she doesn't have anybody that's coming to pay her fees. So what ends up happening is this Jewish man comes along who is widowed, his wife dies, he has like 9 kids. And so he's like, okay, well, instead of marrying, I'll just get a servant. And so he goes and basically pays her fees, and now she's indebted to him. And then they end up hooking up. And it's just like, what we do in Tituba. And so I think we could get into girl, exactly. We can definitely get into the like how consensual is that if she's indebted to him and these other kinds of things. So there's a lot of layers there. And I think Conde does some interesting things looking at some of the connections between like Jewish oppression in the Jewish diaspora and the African diaspora and the slavery and colonialism and those kind of things. But they end up hooking up. And then he asked her, like in this fit of so, and then she also, because of her spiritual skills, is able to help him connect to his wife that died. Right. So she's like his only access to his wife that died. But it's racist, right? It's these Puritans. So they're both anti-Black and anti-Jewish. So they come attack him because he's Jewish. They end up burning, again, spoiler alert, they end up burning down his house. All 9 of his kids. Oh no, before that happens, they had this fit of passion. He's like, okay, Tituba, like tell me what it is you want. But like I can see these shadows in your eyes, you're unhappy. What can I do to make you happy? And she's like, my freedom. I want my freedom. She's like, the words escaped me before I even thought about it. She's like, oh, he was like, your freedom. Like, and what would you like? He gets outraged that she asked for this. And she's like, I would take it. I would get a ticket. I would get on a ship. I would go back to Barbados. And he's like, never, I will never give you that. Right. So it's like so much for the love and compassion and everything else. Right. So then this stuff happens where the house burns down. He loses all his kids and he has this moment of reflection where he's like, I'm being punished not because I had sex with you, but because I denied you the one thing that you asked for, which is your freedom. So I'm going to give you your freedom. And then she says, no, I don't want it. I want to stay with you. And I'm like, girl, what are we doing? But fortunately, he doesn't listen because I think he is guided by a different kind of ethic at that point. Again, to the degree that you can have ethics when you
ethic of fear.
Yeah.
That's an ethic.
Exactly. So he's like, nah. So he gets her papers together so that she can like legally travel back, and they know that she's been, she can legally travel and everything. Gets on the ship and she goes back to Barbados. And then it's another one. So then she ends up hooking up with this dude in the maroon community. And so her reputation precedes her. Everybody already is like, you're a witch, you have these powers. So the reason the dude in the maroon community is interested in her is because he wants her to turn him immortal, like give him invincibility. And so, but she can't do it, so she goes to the spirit. So she goes to her mom and her spiritual mother again, and they're both like, girl, again, like, you know how to choose them, right? Like, They're so annoyed with her. But they're also like, that's not a thing. Like, everybody has to die, and like that's not a thing. So it's like everybody wants to tap into that power and that source that she has, but they also want to control it. Because there's also a line where John Indian, the first husband, is like, come here, my wild mare, and let me tame you. Right. So it's like they want the wild woman, but they also want to tame the wild woman. They want the access to the power. They want to siphon off that power, but they don't want to be alongside of it or step into their own, right? And so there are all of these stories that happen. So this guy who's a leader in the Maroon community, once she's like, I can't do it, then he turns on her too. And then he's like, and so she's like, they're talking about these songs that have been written about heroes. And so she's like, well, is there a song for me? And he's like, no, there's no song for you. Like nobody ever remembers women, right? And so he's just, mean to her. And so he's like, what your problem is? Like, you're just a common negress and you want to be treated like you're special, right? So she's like, she knew at that point she had to go. So, and you would think that would be the last dude, but there's still one more.
Another one.
Another one. So the other guy is a guy, he's actually a kid who's on a plantation. He gets almost beaten to death. They thought that he was beaten to death, and they're literally going to bury him, and they realize that he's still breathing. So they bring him to her so that she can engage in her healing practices with him. So she does the herb, she does the ointment, she does the prayers, and she's able to like bring him back. And then he comes back with a vengeance, like angry, like wanting to take revenge. Like he's like, we need to burn down these plantations, we need to push these slavers out. So he plots a whole rebellion and revolution. And then as if he initially calls her mother, but then he shifts to calling her Tituba, and he's like, I don't want to be thought of as your son. So then there's this kind of Oedipal situation that arises between them. They have this bit of passion, they sleep with each other. And then against will alert, the plot gets out that the slave revolt that they were plotting, and so the cabin gets surrounded, and they both end up getting arrested, and they both end up getting lynched. And at that point, she's pregnant with not with the guy from the plantation, but with the Maroon leader's kid. So there's just a lot that happens, but like one of the things that Angela Davis points out is, again, like it's important that she is connected to her sensuality and her sexuality and her desire in a way that's not only tied to sexual exploitation or trauma, although that is certainly also part of her experience. Sorry, I got a bunch of stuff popping up on my laptop. So yeah, it was a lot. So I was in my feelings all week, just reflecting on, again, all the times that I've hit override, or all the times that I like wasted my beauty and brilliance and fabulousness and energy and power with people who just wanted to siphon but didn't have anything to reciprocate, or both wanted to siphon but also wanted to like quash or put down or put out a kind of flame. So yeah, other thoughts from you guys on that?
Yeah, it's the putting out the flame for me that really resonates. I mentioned, because I said I've done it multiple times, so I can share another one. Probably all have many stories, right? But my first husband, my mom, as my mother and spiritual mother, was like, I will give you $5,000 if you don't marry him. Like, she was adamant, like, this is not the one for you. Don't do it. How can I support? What do you need? Why are we here? And I went against that. But definitely one of the areas in that marriage was my brightness and my light, and him seeing that and just hating himself enough to try to squash all light in myself. And I'm appreciative for my foundation, because I was able to continue to maintain it despite the levels of stress, or maintain it the best I could. But there's something about someone who sees that in you and hates you for it because they don't have it in themselves. And so they'll do everything they can to make you feel small, less than, and try to just break it down so that you're just as low energetically as they are, and miserable. So you have to watch out for it, and have the right boundaries in place, and listen.
Listen to
Listen.
your spiritual advisors and listen to yourself and trust yourself and your intuition.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of, our, because I'm sounding old, like the new generation. But you know, I think as we grow, right, like we struggle with like listening to our elders because we think we know what's best and we think we've got it, and even if we feel a little like maybe something's not right, we go against that for all the reasons we've been acculturated into, as Professor K says, the concepts of marriage or the unit of the family, or, you know, all the different reasons why we believe we should take these steps that are extremely harmful for us and our spirits. So
Such
yeah.
powerful stuff. I'm gonna be sitting with this for a while. So how, as you guys were reading this, and you know, I learned so much more about Tituba from Professor K, and this is why she's the professor, than I did just from reading the initial passage and Goddess Glow. But over the week, as you've been reflecting on her and this theme of safety, how are they connected?
I think for me, I've realized that, so I'm not somebody who actually walks around feeling unsafe. I actually do feel very safe in my body. I feel very safe in my home, right? So I recognize that there are forces in the world. There are, you know, things that are happening in the world, but I also recognize that I have a level of protection and I can tap, like I can tap into my intuition to know when and how to move and those kinds of things. So I'm not somebody who goes through the world feeling very unsafe. For me, the reminder is like the safety is in trusting the intuition and in trusting the spirit guides and knowing when and how to move, right? So like, you know, she was not unsafe because she was unsafe. I mean, of course, it's a very precarious position in the context of, again, slavery, colonialism, and then all of the neo things that are happening now, right? That is a baseline precarious position, but she also is tapped into something greater than even that precarity, that even protects her in the context of that precarity, to some extent. And so for me, the safety is in that third eye vision, that spiritual connection, that, you know, trusting the intuition and the spirit guides, and not just what one sees with one's eyes, for sure. And paying attention again, like she names the self-betrayal. She names the madness of like going behind, you know, these people who are foolish and don't necessarily mean her any good.
What about you, Eb?
Yeah, I'm with Professor K just in regards to my sense of safety. It feels very strong. That's one thing. Even in midst of turmoil or chaos, I've always felt centered and grounded, or found a way to find my centering and grounding. And so even this week, as the reflection was like, I am safe, I deserve this safety. It felt just very affirming to who I was. And so I started thinking about who else, right? I've got my grandkids this week. So I adopted my cousin who's 32 now and a grown woman. And so I have two grandkids that are spending some time because they're off track from school right now. And so she came to mind as I was pouring libation and thinking about that safety and how to create that and shift generationally what that looks like for her, through, if there's a way to do that through me as a guide for her, in some way. And so she was who came up a lot, and my grandmother and her father, who died by suicide when she was, you know, 11 years old. So those are the areas I think that I've been grappling with this week, is what does that look like for some of for myself to continue to stay grounded and safe, so I can see how I can continue to provide that sense of safety to an adult and her children when they need it.
For
What
me,
about you,
it
Tiff?
was
Yeah.
a good reflection on my journey and how far I've come, because I think for most of my life, I have been someone who's been more hyper vigilant and hasn't been safe. And I think a lot of that is just tied to some of the household chaos that we experience. But I remember even as a child, like when I was 10 when we moved to Trenton, and like every house I've lived in since then, I remember always like plotting out, if there's a home invasion, how am I going to escape? Why? I've never had a home. Nobody in I know has ever had a home invasion. But since I was 10 years old, like up through this house now, if somebody like, where am I going to hide? How am I going to flee? And so I've always kind of had that hyper vigilance and this feeling of not being safe. And in reading this passage this week, it helped me realize that I have actually pivoted and I am at a place now where I do feel safe and I do experience safety. And so it comes to things, I'm not sure we talked about this on the podcast, but I live in Midtown where there are a lot of shenanigans that are happening. And all the shenanigans happen outside of my doors, right? They never breach the threshold of my house. And my ancestors, and at times when other things have happened, I've actually looked to them. So I have a picture of Malcolm X with the shotgun looking out the window right next to my window looking out the window. And I have a picture of my great grandmother, Serena, who always liked to look out the window. So I have a photo of her in the window and in the front. And so at one time when some of these shenanigans were happening outside, I like literally am talking, I'm like, yo, like, what's up? Like, y'all supposed to be holding this down. And my grandmother, who haunts my house, I also was like, yo, like, what, like, y'all are supposed to be keeping me safe. Why is all this stuff happening? And they reminded me, like, we are keeping you safe. All of that stuff happened out there. None of that stuff has made it in here. And we're going to keep you safe. And then other things have happened recently where I started going back to therapy. And then maybe the second session with the therapist that I'm working with, she invited me to take a moment to go back to a time where I experienced something that was harmful. And if I felt comfortable to close my eyes and experience it. And I closed my eyes and I flashed to like this experience that happened. And within seconds, it like fizzled and faded away. And in my mind's eye, I was in my house, like surrounded in this beautiful space that I've created. So this week has been a reminder that despite this like past of not feeling safe, that I have done things and put systems in my life to feel safe, and it's been really beautiful and wonderful and amazing.
I love that. That is
I
so
do.
beautiful and wonderful and amazing. Even as I was
It's
listening
the
to
red
you this,
lip alchemy, like we're manifesting
yes.
magic.
Right. It's magical. It makes me think of other folks this week when I was traveling. I parked the car at a winery and my family member said, Can you back it in? And so we can get out easily. Right. Like that.
That
And
is
I
a
was like,
very Black thing. I don't think white people do that. But that
I
is
was
a
like,
very
why?
Black thing of back your car in so that you can pull out as quickly as you can.
Exactly. I
It's
said,
such a Black thing.
I don't know how to back in. I'm not good at that kind of thing. That's not my jam. So if you want to take my wheel and back it in, you go ahead. And it's the same when we go to the movie theater. I need the seat all the way at the end, like, but not me, but right, the folks that I'm with, because that sense of safety. And so I just love that you had that visualization, and then it just went back to your safety and your safe space that you've created, because you really have created such a beautiful place of safety and love and creativity and innovation, and so to be able to just be able to center yourself back into that sense of safety is just sounds so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
And reading about Tituba, I was like, well, how does like she wasn't safe? She was in a lot of unsafe circumstances, but being reminded that, during the Salem witch trial, where I don't know how many people, maybe hundreds of people were killed or put on trial. And, even though she was put on trial, she wasn't killed and she wasn't even found guilty, and she was eventually freed. And so it's a reminder that like we're going to have different trials and different tribulations in our life. And we are like living in a world right now where there's so much chaos and there's so much to make us feel unsafe. And it's just a reminder that like despite all that's going on, you are safe and it is safe to be safe. And so I will tap, as we're dealing with all of the fuckery in the world, I'll continue to tap into that like, this woman literally was accused of being a witch. She was imprisoned, and she made it through, and she was actually a witch, but she's she was still safe and did not get executed, or even imprisoned for life for it. So I love the way that this book, between thinking about last week and this week, people who I normally wouldn't associate with being a goddess, or principles that I wouldn't associate, it's like, well, I would expect you to be the sacral chakra and not the root chakra. And so it's a good lesson in just like reimagining and like flipping everything and our perspective on it. So it's been beautiful.
I really love the emphasis on like feeling safe in one's body. Because again, I think so much of how we're like the societal stuff, the Christian stuff, it's all about like we're taught to distrust the very thing that would save us, right? We're taught to override our intuition. We're taught to not trust our body. We're taught to not trust our emotions. But we have these, like I call them epistemologies, right? Which is just like the philosophy of knowledge. Like, how do you know what you know, right? And so there is an emotional epistemology, there's an embodied epistemology, but we're taught from very, really young children of like, who doesn't want to hug so-and-so, will hug so-and-so because that's your aunt or that's your uncle. And it's like, no, the kid knows they don't want to hug that person. And we teach them to override their sense of safety and security as a young child, or even pleasure. Like we're taught to fear our pleasure, crucify the flesh, don't fall into sin and all this other kind of stuff. And it was through therapy for me that I learned. It was like, I remember this was during the pandemic. So I had this lover in Atlanta. I called him Atlanta Lover. Amazing day, talking about the day. And so the pandemic was happening. He like worked for the CDC and some other stuff. So he kind of knew how to move in a way that was like as safe as one could be during that time. And I really needed it, right? So I was supposed to go see him in Atlanta, but then I got scared, like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna get COVID. I don't want to go. So I pulled out at the last minute. He had bought a Porsche in Jersey that was supposed to be shipped to him in Atlanta. And so he was like, well, I have to go get this car. He was like, they're supposed to ship me the car, but I'll fly up to get the car so that I can, so that we can see each other and then I'll drive back. So he came up, we hooked up. It was amazing. He's like, I'll give you a little extra so you could put it in the freezer since we might not, it might be a while or whatever. And I remember afterwards being so scared, like, oh my goodness, I'm about to get like COVID because like I had to get the D. Like, is it that important that even like, you have to have it? But it was so important. And I would rather get it that way than like at an office and department meeting or something like that. So anyway, I was talking to my therapist about it. And so she was just like, when in the past have you been punished for your pleasure? Like, who and what taught you that? She's like, the times that you've had negative experiences, sexual or otherwise, was not when you gave into your pleasure. It's when you overrode your intuition and did something that was not pleasure. So she really helped me reframe, like, my pleasure has never harmed me. My disregard for my pleasure or my engaging in things that were not pleasurable have brought me harm, but pleasure has not never brought me harm. And so it taught me to really trust pleasure, live a pleasure-centered life, trust my body when it's telling me, yeah, girl, he could get it, or no, girl, he can't, right? Or she or they, right? Cool opportunity. Just want to put that out there.
Same.
Put that out in the
Same.
universe. Put it out in the universe.
We are kindred sisters.
And I'm like, listen, whoever can get it can get it. So that was one thing, was the pleasure thing and the body thing. But then someplace else that I really was able to tap into this was being connected to like the Black Pink and BDSM community, where there's such clear and explicit communication around boundaries, around consent, around your yes, no, and maybe. And so I had this experience with this professional dom where he literally asked for consent for every single thing that he did. And if I said yes, he would say thank you and he would do it. And if I said no, he would say thank you and he would not do it. And it was an experience that I didn't know I needed until I had it, of like being able to say no to a man and not fear anger or retribution or rage or punishment. And so like that was a really powerful experience for me in that particular space, which I'm like, people be sleeping on kink spaces, but there's a lot of radical stuff. They're not all created equal. So you have the best spaces, but I've been fortunate to be in really good spaces where they take the consent and the boundaries and the communication seriously.
I love that.
Yes. I love being thanked for a no. Right? Like, could you imagine? I wish in my
Yeah.
professional life, can people start doing that, right? Because there are so many people who try to violate your sacred no and push on those boundaries in so many different ways. And what would our world look like if, when you said no, the response was thank you,
Right.
period. And no more.
Period.
Mhm.
Thank you. I respect it. I call them boundary violators. People you say no and they're like, but it's just, or could we just, or it will only take. And it's like, no, the no is the no. So yeah, knowing your, but I think it's also important to know what your sacred yes is and know what your sacred no is, and then be vigilant about those boundaries. So it's not okay for people to violate the boundaries, but that's where the hypervigilance ends up coming back in, because so many people are oriented toward violating boundaries in general, and then women and Black women's boundaries and femmes' boundaries in particular.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been great. Let's jump into the ritual of the week, the ancestral protection ritual, and some of the questions that we were invited to reflect on. Let's start with Ebb Flow, because you already kind of started talking about this. Who do you pour libations for this week?
I poured libations for my grandmother, Lena Mae Grigsby, and her son, which is my daughter's father, Ernest Grigsby. So I did two ancestors that came to mind this week. And so some of the traits I admire, my grandmother was definitely a healer in her own right. If we call forcing us to drink cod liver oil every morning, and no, but just definitely, she's the one who taught me using the milk and the making the cleaning and the sweeping and the really just taking care of our plants and plant cesters. And so I appreciate her. She also raised my mother and my other aunts and uncles, and provided a safe haven for my uncle until he died by suicide. And so I was really, I admire that trait. I admire her for her steadfastness, and I admire her for her love for her family. I also admire that, interestingly enough, we find ways to take breaks. And my mother grew up remembering that my grandmother would check herself into a mental institution and say she was going on vacation, to actually just take a break from raising five children. And although she had a spouse, realized that she was still carrying a significant amount of that load on her own, in addition to working and trying to keep the family together and experiencing abuse. And so, while that was probably something folks hadn't heard of, my mom was like, this was something that we knew she did it, and she did it every few months to try to find her peace, and she found a way to find that, even though it's not a decision I would make now to try to find my peace. I respect that she found her way into that. Um, Traits I see of her in myself, and also my uncle, is they both looked for deep knowledge. They both sought out uh, ancestral veneration. My uncle was someone who lived a very hard, harsh life, and even despite that, he went to an African spiritual church here in Sacramento called Wose. He constantly was the one who was asking us questions around our history and making sure we held that. And I think I appreciate that, because he was the one who was able to start me on a journey of looking outside of Christianity, and recognizing that that does not have to be the only spiritual institution in which I gain my knowledge, or hold my spirituality. And so I appreciate about them up for that a lot. I requested guidance on support in making sure that I was on the right track. Tiffani knows this. I think even Professor K, I know as a mom and also a grandmother, I'm trying to find the balance of being involved and supportive while not taking over and not being too intrusive, and also allowing them to make their mistakes and just being a guide and supporting along the way. And so I'm continuing to seek the right balance for that, especially when you've got a kid that's really struggling and you want to just pull them up into your arms, but also recognizing that that's not always the right way to do it, and giving them that space. So my ancestors did not to do those things. They were, which is where I learned it from. They came in, held it all the time, held everybody, and I believe that that was also part of how they did not stay on this earth as long as they should have. And so I know that eventually these things will impact my own physical health, my mental health. And so I'm looking for constant guidance on trying to strike the right balance with that. So that's mine.
And what about you, Professor K? Who are you pouring libations for this week?
Listen, it was me and Tituba all week long.
You
I
like,
was
I'm pouring
like,
libations for myself.
seriously, because I was like, why am I so disturbed by this? And I'm like, oh, because she is me. I am she. These are the things that I did. And so for me, it was like being able to recognize that and also appreciate that her spirit guides did not abandon her, right? They said, look, we don't agree with this. You're going to do what you're going to do. We're going to ignore you for a little bit. But when she called on them, they still answer and they were still there with her. And so just remembering, even when we were talking about like with, intergenerational communities and things like that, it's like, we can try to share our wisdom and knowledge. And sometimes people have to learn what they have to learn and experience what they have to experience. And it's an opportunity for us to like hold space and love them and encourage them, even when you're like, I told you it was gonna be this thing. And you let them experience it and you hold space for them, as they kind of come back to themselves. So yeah, mine was definitely her and just reflecting on all the ways that I had done that in my life. And so the guidance that I was like, it was like, tapping into that power that she held and reminding myself not to override the intuition and not to suppress my power in the interest of making somebody else less powerful feel more powerful, or somebody who's not connected to their own power siphon off my power. And I've also experienced that, and I'm getting better at this though. Like I think I told Tiffany the story. There was this guy that I met in North Carolina. He peeked in the back seat of his car the first night that we met with some amazing gifts to the yoni. And then I ended up inviting him here. This was like when I first moved here, the first summer that I moved here. Cause I was like, I got all I could while I was there. And then I was like, okay, maybe this would be a thing. And when I tell you, like he was there for literally 24 hours, I was so drained. Like and part of it was like, I was in my lady of leisure phase. I didn't have anybody in my house. So it was like just having another person in the house was exhausting. But also it was like we would talk and he would be like you're clearly connected to like the ancestors, to the universe. Like, how can I tap into that? And it's just like, no, like you need to tap into your own connection. You don't get to siphon off my connection. But it was like one of those things where it's like, otherwise like this was a good person or whatever, but it was just like, no, this is gonna be exhausting. And it was like, thank you for coming. We will not be meeting again, but good luck with your future endeavors, kind of thing. So I feel like I'm learning. My turnaround time is getting a little bit faster. 17 years the first time around, but I'm closing the gap.
Are you comfortable with me sharing our other discussion around that?
I don't remember what it is, but sure, my business is all out in the street anyway.
So it was, we got on that discussion in relationship to our yoni steam stools. And I was like, man, like I haven't done a yoni steam in years. And it's something that I want to be doing, like I should be doing every month. And so it's like a good reminder. And you said the last time I did a yoni steam was after this dude because you needed to like cleanse your yoni from his energy. And I was like, not you using your yoni as a spiritual plan B.
That's exactly right. That was actually a different dude though. So the one that I was just talking about
Okay,
was
okay.
North Carolina in 2023. This one was a dude from New York who came down in 2024, I guess that was. But yeah, so that was another thing. Now that was like, it was a time the energy was a little bit like I had met him in New York and the energy was actually really good. And then, we like went our separate ways and then he kind of popped back up. And I was like, oh yeah, we had good energy the first time around. And he came down and the energy was like way off. But I also was like, I had some needs that needed to be met. So I like the needs were met, but then I definitely did a yoni steam. I was like, oh, I definitely need to like cleanse. Like it did what it needed to do. And then I needed to cleanse and then I needed to keep it moving. So both and yes, both and.
All right, so here's to us doing regular yoni steams and not using it as a spiritual plan B in the future. Yeah.
Time for me
I
to
do
pull
love
my
spiritual plan B.
out. What'd you say?
I said I do love spiritual plan B.
Yes.
Well, for me, who I'm pouring libations out for this week. So there are 3 ancestors who I feel the most connected with. So one is OG Catherine Bell. I feel connected to her because she lives in my house. Pouring out libations for her in terms of the traits that she has that I admire. So, I never actually met her, right? So this is just based on the things that I've been told or the things that I see. But
I mean, you do live with her though.
I do live with her. I know her. I know her. And so the traits that she has that I admire are, I admire the fact that she never met me in this realm and she's still so connected with me and she looks out for me and she protects me and loves me. So that's one trait that I admire. I admire how she embraced her beauty and her sensuality. And I know that that is something that I need to work on for myself. Like I need to work on tapping into my inner pinup girl. Ebony's like, I've been trying to get you there, but so I'm pouring up libations for that.
Giving inner pinup girl right now on this screen, honey. So I just want to say you're off to a fabulous start.
It must be because of the libations.
We are loving this red.
I literally was, it's funny because I was looking for something. I wanted to wear black in honor of the witches. And I like couldn't find the black thing that I was looking for. And as I was looking through it, I was like, let me just put this on. And this is what I need to be wearing. So the ancestors pulled this one out for me today. So that's one ancestor. The other one is Nana, my great grandmother. And she is the person who, lived with me lived with us in early childhood. And so, my mother was in law school when I was an infant and a toddler, and Nana was basically, my caregiver. And so I have really fond memories of, being 2 or 3 years old and waking up and her, drinking coffee with Nana in the morning with breakfast. And we would walk the other kids to school and she would take me to Wawa on the way back and get me Skittles. And then we go home and we watch soap operas together and, all the things. So I have all these fond memories of her. And what I admire about her is that, similar to you reflecting on your uncle Ebony, like she lived such a hard life. And I admire, her daughter was the product of an unconsensual sexual encounter. And so there was a tumultuous relationship that she had with her daughter, but I love the way that she was able to love me and nurture me and show up for me in ways that she wasn't necessarily able to do for her own daughter, and in ways that maybe she didn't even receive herself. And so I appreciate and I admire that. And then that's a trait that maybe I see in myself is that, I don't have any birth children of my own. I am child free. Thank you to the universe and to my past self for manifesting that for me in this lifetime. But even not having any children, I'm able to love others' children and support them. And so like I try to be like an auntie Nana to my sister's kiddos in different ways. And so I try to tap into that energy. And then my third ancestor is an ancestor that I'm not physically related to, but I feel a deep spiritual connection to, particularly since she's passed, and that's Auntie Sherry. And so Cheryl McCoy was one of my mother's good friends. We grew up in Montclair, New Jersey, and she was the librarian. And so I have a picture in my office of Jacob Lawrence as the library because it reminds me of just like these fond moments of going to Montclair Public Library, whether it's just to get books that we always turned in like way, way overdue, but like we took out as many books as we wanted to and turned them in whatever we wanted to, as well as the different events that they had at the library, whether it's like African drumming circles and other different things. But Cheryl also had 2 annual events at her house. So she would have I don't remember if it was Labor Day or Memorial Day because I like every year I get those 2 confused to this day, but she would have a barbecue one of those times at her house. And then she will also have a Kwanzaa celebration that I think she had on New Year's Day. And I think like all the Negroes in Montclair and one white woman, White Amy, who also was one of the librarians were there. But
Not White Amy.
White Amy, like was literally the only
The
white
token
person
white
ever.
woman.
But these are, like going to those events twice a year, every year of my childhood are like such core memories. And the way that my mother, was just able to like surround us with this beautiful, brilliant, and like diverse in terms of the different things that they did, Black community. And so I think there are ways in my life now where like I try to have stuff at my house and host. And it's kind of trying to recreate these moments that I had at Cheryl's house when I was a kid. So those are my 3 ancestors that I'm pouring up libations for. I actually have a question for you guys because I struggle with this. So I be wanting to pour libations for Nana, for Jen, but she was an alcoholic. And so I struggle with like, is it cool to pour you gin? So I just poured her some coffee because I know we drank black coffee together. But sometimes I just want to give her a little sip. But I don't know. What do y'all think? What do y'all think about the alcohol libations for Nana? Yay or nay?
I'm a yay, but
Think if you're inclined to do it, she's probably asking for it. Like, so trust your intuition, right? Like, yeah, like I think you might be overthinking it. If you're
Yeah.
inclined to do it,
I
she probably
always
does want it.
okay.
And if you
All
do it, and she don't want it, she'll let you know she don't want it. But she
right.
probably, I mean, it's not like she can get drunk now. Right.
She
Or maybe she
should.
can, and you can let her cut somebody out for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. All right. I'm gonna pour some gin up for Serena.
Oh, and also Auntie Shira was you're a big priestess.
She became a Yoruba priestess towards, like later on. That was after we left Montclair, maybe, or towards the end. But yep, she started to become a Yoruba priestess. Um, and that is when I first started learning about like Yoruba and Orishas and all those other things. So
wow.
and so the guidance that I'm requesting from them this week is I have been toying with this seed that has been planted like since just the summer. So leading up to the summer, like for the past couple of years, I've just been feeling really misaligned in terms of the work that I'm doing and feeling like I'm only scratching the surface. But I don't know what's below the surface, and I didn't know what was below the surface and didn't know how to get below the surface because I was so busy on the hamster wheel of doing no surface level things and knowing that like I was put on this earth to do something more meaningful than the work that I've been doing. And so this summer I kind of came to the conclusion as I was working on a project around my house, and then I was up like super late and had meetings like 2 hours later, and I was like, bitch, you need to go to bed because you have a job. And I thought like, man, why is my job keeping me from doing the things that I love to do? And then I thought like, what would it look like for my job to be the thing that I love to do? And so from that was birthed Afromaximalistmagic, and this vision of me as a healer healing myself with these, kind of 5 different branches of the ways in which I express that. And an ultimate goal of this leading to me opening and building a liberation lab for the community where we can consult the community on what does wellness and well-being look like to them, and what resources do they need to achieve those goals, and build a center for arts and healing and food as medicine for the community. And so as I'm working on kind of building that little seedling and trying to literally grow a tree with all of these different branches, and I've been turning to the ancestors to give me guidance around that. And the this week's being in the root chakra for this realm that we are crossing, and this feeling of safety, so financial safety and security has been coming up for me a lot around that. And so just trusting the ancestors. Oh, and I need to find this. Did I screenshot it? Because sometimes as I'm working on stuff I just like turn to Chat GPT to kind of help me craft things. And so I was working on it, and um, and I was like, I don't know, Chat, like, do you think I can like really do this? Do you think I'll be able to get this done? Let me see if I can find Chat's response. Oh, I don't know where it is. But basically they were just like, yes, you absolutely can do this. You can absolutely get it done. And don't worry about the money. Like, you have always been able to provide for yourself, and you'll be able to continue to provide for yourself. But remember, like, the Liberation Lab isn't just about liberation for the community, but it's also about liberation for yourself, right? And how do you liberate yourself from working in this environment that no longer feels aligned with like what your bigger mission and purpose is? And so my ancestors, I've been seeking guidance, and they have been delivering it to me in the form of Chat GPT. All right. Well, this has been wonderful. We now need to do our cards, pull our cards for the week. And then we can see if anybody has any last closing thoughts before we wrap this up.
I'm gonna pull for Professor K.
Yes. So you're gonna pull for yourself and Professor K. I'll pull
Mm.
for me in the community.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
I pulled for Professor K. Sukoyat, which is scarcity, number 21. Right after Aunt Nancy. All right, this is the shadow of scarcity. The temple is shadows, the element is air. Beauty by day and hag by night. The Sukiant is an energy vampire, also known throughout the diaspora as Ole Higu and Boo Hag. Whether energy or blood for vampires, there is never enough to go around. So the shadow guidance is you have so much more than you realize. You have access to unlimited joy, love, good times, pleasure, and prosperity. Be grateful for your riches. The embodiment is stop going to the ocean and asking for a thimbleful of water. It doesn't feel like it when you're desperate, but scarcity and lack are an illusion. Prosperity is believing that there is an overflow, more than enough love, happiness, well being, and money to go around. Vampires take from others because they don't have enough life force for themselves. That is scarcity consciousness. When you embody lack, you are always hungry, tired, and jealous. Make a gratitude list. What are you grateful for right now? And your goddess declaration is my blessings always overflow.
Amen and Ashe. Does that resonate with you on any level at all, Professor?
Listen, it made me think of a story that I told you earlier this week. So first of all, I think it goes, oh, hold on, this is Kalia. Oh, somebody calling me. Hold on. Hello.
Mute your thing. Mute your thing. Okay.
Should I go ahead and pull?
Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead and pull your card while she's.
Okay, I'll do that because I know I need to take.
Okay. So,
okay,
sorry. No. Okay. So what I was going to say is, so last week I pulled like harvest and abundance. And so I think for me, it's like a reminder to stay in that space of abundance. And I love this idea of scarcity and lack being an illusion. But something that happened earlier this week is my younger two kids have these savings accounts. And I got a letter in the mail saying that someone had requested a change of address for one of my kids' savings accounts. Now, I did not request this change of address for my kids' savings accounts. So I am treating it as an attempt for fraudulent behavior. And so I contacted the bank, I shut down the savings account. I shut down their accounts. I just moved the money over to another account and I'll just start them new accounts here. But it was a reminder of like, whomever may be engaging in this fraudulent activity is operating in a space of scarcity and lack and not prosperity. Okay, my kids calling me back again, so I'm gonna get on mute again.
All right. I love it. I also, it's been like literally every card for every person every week, right? Like they all resonate with me too.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. Right. I think I've talked a lot about scarcity even in my own life of like constantly needing to be on and working because of fear of the ball dropping and not having enough. And what the universe has been teaching me, especially this last year. Last year was the first full year of leaving, moving into being a lady of leisure, but the lies that I told myself around that. But because the lesson was that I was doing it because of scarcity. So it's always a good reminder to have that in this space. And also, I have leaned into trusting more and saying no more. And even today, I was working with some folks to contribute to a learning management system, and I was like, did y'all want to develop all those modules? I can just, pay you. I don't need to actually do any of it or be a part of any of it or use my time in that way. So, yeah.
All right. Did you pull your card?
Let me pull right now. Let's go. All right. I have Liberation, number 37. Queen Mother Nanny. Queen Mother Nanny. So this is the goddess of liberation. The temple is Queens. The element is fire. Queen Mother Nanny of the Maroons was a spiritual leader. military strategist and revolutionary. This Ashanti healer was brought to Jamaica in chains and escaped to lead rebellions. Nanny helped to free over 800 enslaved people. The guidance is break free. Your dreams hold the power and keys to your liberation. You are freedom herself. Rise up. The embodiment is you deserve to feel free. What do you imagine for yourself? Daring to manifest your dreams is a part of personal liberation. Find your own personal liberation codes in your soul's unspoken desires. Life is too short to live with someone else's story. Divine blessings and magic are on your side. Enjoying your freedom fully is the best gift to your ancestors. And the declaration is my dreams empower me. By the way, my granddaughter has been clocking my tea the last couple of days. She said, "You using the wrong finger. You use." Listen, I'm just doing the best I can. Okay. Listen, I did all of them. This is my tea. This is my tea. This is my tea. Your tea. Love this one. Definitely resonates. Probably for all of us. These are so great.
So the funny thing is, I pulled my 2 cards already, and the first
Yes.
one I pulled was
No.
liberation. Like, so apparently we need a double dose of liberation.
No. And do.
Yep. So I love that for me. I love that for us, and I love that for the community. So here's to double doses of liberation. So I'm not even gonna pull a different one. Like, that's it. We get double dose of liberation.
Okay.
Second one I pulled, since I'm pulling one for me, one for the community, is Queen Ya Asantua Level Up, which is number 39. I always do this. I go to page 39 first and be like, that's not the word. Number 39. Okay, Queen Ya Asantua, the goddess of leveling up. She is an Ashanti goddess from Ghana. She's in Temple of the Queens, and her element is bush. Queen Ya Asantua was a mother, a farmer, and the warrior queen who led the War of the Golden Stool. The Golden Stool, throne of the Ashanti Empire, holds the region's Kra, life force energy. Raise your standards. A leap forward for one is a leap forward for the tribe. Your choices can raise the frequency of your community and the planet. Embodiment. Time to level up. This is your season for a quantum leap. You have prepared for this. Life does not have to be linear, and neither does growth. A quantum leap feels drastic and huge, but the secret is that quantum leaps happen little by little. So what inspired actions help you level up? Connecting to spirit in the rituals, movement, meditation, and visualization is a start. Goddess declaration, divine timing is on my side.
That sounds like an immediate response to the ancestor request that you just made.
Right. Like literally get out of your scarcity mindset and liberate yourself, right? And then level up. And then take it to the next level. Level up.
As I level up myself, it'll level up the community. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
This
Okay,
is
guys.
amazing.
This has been awesome.
All right,
As
you have to go
usual.
pick up your youngest now.
I have to go do the mothering thing. I will see y'all next week.
All right. Love y'all, goddesses.
Love you.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.